Welcome to the Church Answers podcast. My name is Thom Rainer. Jess Rainer is on vacation. He'll be joining us in the next episodes. But I want to take this time to talk to you about a number. Now, doesn't that just sound as exciting as it can be? Oh, good. Thom is going to talk to us about a number. I cannot wait. And I was going to use this while I was jogging. I think I'm going to use it to put me to sleep. Now, stay tuned. I might get your attention in this because we'll be talking about a number that I had not seen this research, and it's not mine, but I'm going to share with you what it is. In the meantime, I want to thank Wesley Biblical Seminary, our new sponsor. I'm going to stop saying new pretty soon because they've been with us for a few weeks now. Let me just say, folks, if you're preparing for ministry, this is non-denominational, and it's across the board for many different groups. They are training men and women for ministry. They're offering certifications, undergraduate, master's, doctorate. They certainly have it in the full online format where you don't have to leave your place of ministry, and they have incredible teaching and just incredible leadership. We are extremely proud to have Wesley Biblical Seminary as our ministry partner and to be working with them to help train people. And yeah, certainly you have pastors and staff that could benefit from the seminary, but you have some lay leaders as well. And there's some just incredible programs for them. Check them out, Wesley Biblical Seminary. You can go to WBS, Wesley Biblical Seminary, WBS.edu, which stands for education. WBS.edu. If you happen to be looking at the show notes, we'll have the link there. Okay, what I have been doing, ladies and gentlemen, is in some of my articles and in some of my podcasts, I'm taking a singular number, maybe two numbers if there's some comparison to it, and I'm talking about the significance of that number. If it's a series, I've called it the church number, because it's something that is a singular point in time that I think is worth looking at, I think it is worth talking about, because it can mean something for the church. And much of this data is not so esoteric that it doesn't mean anything, but it's just you don't hear it that much. But when I look at it, I say, wow, this piece of data is fabulous. And I want to share it with you, the listeners and the viewers. A lot of the research is our own. Church Answers has its own research division, but there are a lot of good researchers out there. And in this particular session, I'm going to be looking at the 2023 Faith Community Study called the FACT Study. They were updating it every 5 years, but they had a 2020 and they didn't want to wait to 2025, which would mean it'd be released in 26. They didn't want to wait then because they wanted to see what had happened to the church in the pandemic. And they didn't have any pandemic numbers because the 2020 numbers represented 2019. I hope I'm making sense. And so they've given us an update. They've given us the 2023 numbers recently released in 2024. And I'm just digging through it and I'm having a geek out. But rather than give you a bunch of numbers, I'm going to give you a number, a church number. And the church number is this, 73.7%. That's pretty precise, 73.7%. And this is what surprised me, folks. That number is churches, their pastors, their members that have a positive outlook on the future for their church. Now, if you had asked me to predict, I would have predicted it would have been well under 50%. Certainly not nearly 3/4 of churches in the United States have a positive outlook on their future. But instead, it is 73.7. And you'll hear me say 3/4, and I know 3/4 is 75%, and that's rounding it upward. But for simplicity, 3/4 of churches have a positive outlook. Many of these churches have shrinking attendance. Many of these churches have financial strains. Many of these churches have cultural headwinds where they're in areas that just are not receptive to faith, Christianity, and yet still 3/4 of them have a positive outlook on their future. So what's fueling this optimism, and what does it mean for church leaders? And what does it mean for you, the listener or viewer of this podcast? What does it mean when we say 3/4 of churches have a positive outlook on the future? Now, I'm going to conflate some research, and it's probably inaccurate to do so. So, you research geeks are out there saying, "Tom, don't do that. That's basically apples and oranges." I understand that, but sometimes we have to talk about fruit together. Okay. So, as we look at this number, 73.7, we're also discovering concurrently that Gen Z and probably the generation following them, the kids of Gen Alpha, they are returning to church. And as we are reporting this information, we're finding out that men are coming to church, not just young men, but inclusive of young men. Gen Z, men, there's some things that are going on in the church. And then at the same time, we get a number like 73.7%, or 3/4 of all church members and leaders have a positive outlook on their future. I think that there's something going on where I'm not really conflating that these two separate studies. And if you want to go look at some of the data, read some of Burge's articles. His Substack, Ryan Burge Substack article is called Graphs About Religion. He's one of the best at it. He'll point you to the databases themselves. But I don't think these two phenomenon of numbers are separate. I believe that one of the reasons we have a positive outlook on the future is because we see God doing some work. We see God doing some things that maybe, even as old as I am, I don't recall a time such as this. Certainly there have been points where there have been major revival type of movements, like the Asbury Revival of 1970, February 3rd, 1970, in Hughes Memorial Auditorium, when the revival broke out that spread across the United States, and subsequent movements of God. But now we are seeing a movement of God's people who are coming, a movement of people who are coming to the church, even beyond what we've seen in these revival movements that had their lifespan. And in the midst of this, 73.7% of church leaders have a positive outlook of the future, and church members as well. What does this mean? Well, number one, it means optimism in the face of decline. Even though median church size has dropped to around 60 in worship, even though fewer churches are engaged in social or community service than in the past, the vast majority still express confidence. This shows that they are putting their numbers in the past that have not been so great, and they're holding on to their mission for the future. Now listen, pastor and other church leaders. This is great news for you, because what it means is you have a congregation that is looking for the future, and you are there as God's servant to point them in that direction. In the midst of decline, 3/4 of churches have confidence, a positive outlook about their future. This bodes well for recruiting the type of armies we need to do God's mission. Optimism in the face of decline, that is a sign that God is working. A second thing that we need to know with 73.7%, it means that churches are resilient. It's part of their DNA. Now, I used to say it's hard to kill a church, and then I wrote a book called Autopsy of Deceased Churches. A lot of churches have died. And a lot more churches died after COVID, because the declines that were taking place were exacerbated by the lack of meetings, depending upon where you live, during COVID. And we know that has happened. We've seen that. We've seen it in different churches. I was talking to an African-American pastor, one of my favorite guys. I'm not going to call him out by name because I don't have permission, but just yesterday, and he was talking about the phenomenon of the African-American church and how COVID seemed to hit their churches more than perhaps other churches. But what has happened is many churches are now getting stronger in the midst of all of this. There's an incredible resilience that is taking place. There's a toughness, if you will, where churches are saying, in God's power, we cannot just survive, but we can thrive. Think about it. Churches have been through world wars, depressions, pandemics, polarization, and social upheaval. And yet many of these congregations are now survivors, and that's given them greater hope that they're going to make it even more so in the future to come. Resilience is just part of the DNA of many of these churches. And I think that's what we're seeing with the 73.7% number. Now, I also think it explains what is happening with one of our ministry partners called Upward. Upward is seeing more and more churches call on them. Why? Because they have sports ministries that reach into the community. And these churches that have this positive outlook on the future are calling on Upward and saying, hey, we want to reach our community. And Upward would say, well, let's find a sport that will match you. Maybe you just have one or two people in the church that can do anything with Upward right now. Maybe running, doing a 5K is one of the things you can do. Or maybe you can get a handful of people and do their pickleball ministry. Or maybe you can get groups together for basketball, soccer, flag football, cheerleading, volleyball, baseball, all of the above. My point is this. We're seeing an organization like Upward thrive because churches are optimistic about the future and they want to go into their communities and they're looking for ways to do so. And that's why just go to upward.org/church answers, upward.org/church answers, set up an appointment with them and talk to them about how your church can probably do that. This is for any church of any size. Don't think this is a big church thing, a small church thing, a mid-sized church. They are ministering to all size churches. So let me commend to you Upward Sports, or just upward.org/church answers. 73.7% of churches, members, and leaders have a positive outlook on the future. Why? They have optimism in the face of decline. Why? The resilience is part of the DNA. But here's this third point. Leadership matters. Okay, that's trite, if not cliche. Leadership matters. But here is what we want you to hear, leaders. Pastors and lay leaders who cast a vision set the tone for the church. If the leadership sees a future for the congregation, a God-given vision of a future for their congregation, the congregation inevitably follows. This fact study, FACT, Faith Communities Today, fact study, is showing us that that is what is taking place. Leadership has a vision, I think, like we haven't seen in quite a while. I am optimistic. I am hopeful. But even more than Thom Rainer being optimistic or hopeful, church leaders are optimistic and hopeful. We're seeing great things happen in churches because leaders now, in the midst of all of these challenges, have a vision for the future. The fact data that we are sharing with you, 73.7% of churches have a positive outlook for the future. It reminds us that optimism, or should we just say faith, is a fuel for the fire of revitalization in your church. Leadership matters. Now, I want to bring up a fourth point. First point, optimism in the face of decline. Second point, resilience is part of the DNA. Third point, leadership matters. I want you to hear this fourth point, and I'm simply calling it the faith perspective. We're talking optimism. We're talking a positive outlook. We're talking about hope. But I want to be very clear. This is not some secular marketplace type of hope. This is a hope in what God can do. You know who one of my, this is rhetorical because I know you don't know, unless you've heard me say it, but you know who one of my favorite characters of scripture is Caleb. I love Caleb because he goes in the promised land and says, we can whoop those dudes. They may be big. Who was it? The Anakites, the Canaanites, the termites. I don't know. A bunch of ites. They may be big, but we can whip them. And then when the majority report says we're not going to go there because they're big and they have these big buildings and fortifications, he stays with the Jews as they go into the wilderness. 40 years later, they finally cross the promised land. By this time, Caleb is 85 years old. And he said, those guys that I was going to whip 40 years ago, they're up on that mountain now. Give me that mountain. I may be 85 years old, but I've got God in me, and I'm still as tough as I have ever been. I just want you to hear this, that what we're seeing in many churches is not some type of psychological pop motivational speech. It is truly a belief that God is doing something. Christ is still building his church. Even though the statistics in many churches and many denominations defy what I'm saying, many leaders have this faith perspective. And so it's more than just optimism. It's more than just a positive outlook. It is those things. But it is also built upon the faith that the God who brought the Jews from the wilderness to the promised land, the God who delivered Paul to be a witness for the Gentiles who he persecuted, the Paul that took an 85-year-old man named Caleb and gave him the wisdom, the strength, and the fortitude to conquer people, to take a mountain. That is what we're seeing these days, and it's a faith perspective, and it is a fuel for the confidence of the future. Now, you know me. Maybe you do. If you don't, let me just tell you something about me. I tend to be an obnoxious optimist about the local church. Even before this data came out, I would have been in that 73.7% or whatever it would have been when the study was done a few years ago. I have persistently, if not pugnaciously, had this perspective that God is not done with our churches. God is only done with our churches when his people don't believe that he can. But when his people believe that he can, I'm seeing it again and again, he will. And what I want you to hear, leaders, and what this means for you leaders, is that this positive outlook, again, this is not a motivational speak or pop psychology, but this faith-based outlook, this faith perspective, where 73.7% of church members and church leaders have a positive outlook on the future, it is a powerful resource. Leaders can build on this hope. They can encourage new ministries. They can encourage outreach, and they can encourage revitalization. It just means that they can share a vision, and more that optimism can translate into action within the church. Prior to recording this podcast, I did a live podcast, or I should say a live call conference with a large group of church leaders in Brazil. Great meeting, great men and women of Christ that were in this rather large meeting where I was speaking, obviously virtually. Well, you don't know that. I was speaking virtually. And we had an hour of questions, and they could have gone on and on after my presentation. But one of the questions that came up was something to this effect, and it was, what can I do when my members won't do anything? That's my paraphrase. That's the RSV, the Rainer Simple version. And I've heard that kind of question many times. Well, my people won't do anything. Well, my people are too old. Well, and when I hear that, I know that it's true. I know that the leaders are not telling me that what I'm saying is false. I understand that. And I understand the discouragement can come. And when that person in Brazil asked the question, I told that leader, hey, your question is common. It's not limited to Brazil. It's not limited to the United States. It's common. But I said, have you ever wondered what God can do through just you and maybe one other? Some of the greatest revivals and renewals and revitalizations of churches have taken place when a pastor is able to find someone to just walk with them and say, no matter who else, we're going to go reach our community with the gospel. Just you, just one other. And certainly there will always be the people who say we've never done it that way before. There will always be the people who say we can't do it. There'll always be the people who'll be more concerned about their comfort than the Great Commission. I get that. But when leaders cast a vision, and not only cast the vision, but actify the vision through doing God work for the kingdom, then you will see an incredible result take place in your church. So just remember the single number. The number 73.7%, or round it to 3/4, round it up. What does that mean? That churches have optimism in the face of decline. What does it mean? Resilience is part of the DNA. Many churches are not giving up. What does it mean? It tells us how important leadership is. What does it mean? This is a faith perspective. It's not just pure optimism based upon circumstances. It's a faith perspective. And what this means for leaders is you have a great opportunity, an incredible opportunity to cast a vision to what seems to be congregates, members, and leaders who are truly hungry for that vision. This is good news. I love reporting stuff like this, and I never would have known this stat if it wasn't for the FACT study, which is a incredible study, of Faith Communities Today study, in the 2023 version that was released in 2024, pretty recently from the date of this podcast. So, good news. It's a good number. The church number, 73.7%. Churches that have a positive outlook about the future. Hey, once more, thank you, Wesley Biblical Seminary. As the church continues to renew, revitalize, and grow, we'll need more men and women equipped to do the work of ministry. One of the best places to be equipped will be Wesley. You can do it in your own pace at your own time. It's a highly affordable. It's not easy to do, but they remove the barriers. Let me put it that way, and they make ministry training, theological education, something that you can do. And don't think that has to be a barrier anymore. As churches are increasing their confidence in God's work, they're going to need more equipped leaders like you. Check Wesley Biblical Seminary out. You can go to WBS.edu, Wesley Biblical Seminary, WBS.edu, which is the suffix for education, and you can check them out. I get excited about numbers, but I get particularly excited when I see that 73.7, or nearly 0.75% of church members, church leaders, have a positive outlook for their future, even in the midst of, for many of them, tough times. God's got you. God's going to move you forward. I thank you for letting me tell you that story, and we'll see what God will do in your church.